Hey there. Let me take you back to a quiet Florida neighborhood in the summer of 1951. It was hot, humid, and sticky. The kind of weather where even the breeze feels like a warm blanket. Nothing much happened in the sleepy little city of St. Petersburg. People knew their neighbors. Doors were left unlocked. It was peaceful. But on the morning of July 2nd, 1951, something strange, something no one could explain, shattered that calm. And what happened would become one of the weirdest unsolved mysteries in American history. This is the story of Mary Reeser, a woman who seemingly burst into flames, right in the middle of her living room. No one saw it happen. No one heard it. And to this day, people still ask the same question. Did she die from spontaneous human combustion? Let's dive into the mystery. It started just like any other morning. A woman named Pansy Carpenter, Mary Reeser's landlady, walked up to Mary's apartment to deliver a telegram. Mary, a 67-year-old widow, lived alone in a small rented apartment on the first floor of a two-story house. She was quiet, polite, and well-liked. But that morning, something felt off. As Pansy approached the door, she noticed the doorknob was hot, really hot. That didn't make sense. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. Getting nervous, she called the police. Firefighters arrived, forced the door open, and what they found inside would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Mary Reeser's living room was still mostly intact. The walls were a little blackened by smoke, the ceiling had some soot, and a light fixture had melted and sagged down like warm wax, but nothing else in the room seemed badly damaged. Then they looked down and saw it. In the middle of the floor, right where Mary's armchair had been, was a pile of ashes. A small charred section of the rug, part of the chair springs, and a completely burned human foot, still wearing a slipper. That's right, just her foot. Everything else, her bones, her organs, her skull, was gone, vaporized, cremated, in her own home, in the middle of the night. But here's the weirdest part. The rest of the apartment was fine. Her newspaper was still sitting on the table. Plastic objects nearby had melted, but the room didn't catch fire. The damage was confined to just one small spot. How is that possible? Fire experts were stunned. To burn a human body completely like that, you need temperatures over 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hotter than most house fires. And yet, the apartment wasn't destroyed. There wasn't even a strong smell of smoke outside. It was like she just went up in flames, all by herself. Before we go further, let's talk about Mary. She was originally from Pennsylvania, a widow. Her husband, a doctor, had passed away a few years earlier. Her only son, Dr. Richard Reeser, lived nearby and was a respected physician. Mary was quiet, friendly, and a little lonely. She had some health issues, and she often took sleeping pills or sedatives to help her rest. Oh, and she was also a smoker, a big one. She smoked constantly, often lighting a cigarette just before bed. On the night of July 1st, she told her son she was feeling tired. She took her medication, lit a cigarette, and sat down in her chair to relax. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. The story hit the news quickly. People were fascinated and terrified. Could a person really just catch fire for no reason? At first, investigators thought maybe Mary had fallen asleep with a lit cigarette. Maybe it caught her clothes and she burned to death slowly. But even that theory didn't fully add up. Here's why. A cigarette fire wouldn't get hot enough to cremate a body. There was no major smoke damage to the rest of the apartment. There was no fuel source nearby to keep the fire going that long. And again, just her foot remained. Her skull was even shrunken, almost like a dried apple. That doesn't happen in normal fires. People began whispering about something much weirder: spontaneous human combustion. Spontaneous human combustion, or SHC, is the idea that a person can suddenly burst into flames without any clear external cause. No match, no lighter, just fire from inside the body. It sounds like science fiction or something out of a horror movie. But Mary's case wasn't the first time it had been reported. In fact, there are dozens of strange deaths over the centuries where people were found burned to ashes, but the surroundings were barely touched. And almost all of them had one thing in common. SS, the victims were alone. SS most were elderly or sick. SS many had been drinking or using sedatives. SS, and almost all were smokers. Is it a coincidence, or is there something more? Scientists have long debated the reality of SHC. Most say it's a myth, that there's always a logical explanation. But cases like Mary's make you wonder. Because if it wasn't spontaneous combustion, what was it? Let's talk about the Wick Effect, because it's the most accepted scientific theory out there. Here's how it works. Imagine a candle. The wick burns, but the wax around it fuels the flame. Now imagine a human body. If a person is unconscious or dead, and a small fire starts, their clothing acts like the wick, and their body fat acts like the wax. Once the fire catches, it can slowly burn the body over several hours. It's not a raging fire, it's a low, smoldering burn. That's why the room doesn't go up in flames. In Mary Reeser's case, investigators believe this may have happened. Maybe she fell asleep with a cigarette. It caught her nightgown, and she didn't wake up. Her body fat then fueled the fire, and it burned her almost completely, while the rest of the apartment stayed relatively untouched. Creepy, right? But still, this theory doesn't explain everything. How did her skull shrink instead of explode, like it usually does in fires? How did a fire hot enough to cremate bones not destroy the wooden walls? The Wick Effect might answer some questions, but not all. Mary's case got so much attention that even the FBI got involved. Her son sent a box of evidence to Washington, pieces of her chair, carpet, and ashes. The FBI tested everything, but they couldn't find any trace of accelerants, like gasoline or lighter fluid. No chemicals, no foul play, nothing. Their official report called it an accidental death by fire of unknown origin. And with that, the case was closed. But for everyone else, neighbors, investigators, scientists, it was anything but closed. Because the image of Mary's burned body in a clean little room with just a slippered foot left behind never quite made sense. To this day, the death of Mary Reeser is considered one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in American crime history. Her name often comes up whenever people talk about spontaneous human combustion. Books have been written. TV shows have covered it. Paranormal podcasts love it. Even today, people visit her old apartment building just to stand on the same spot where the fire happened. And here's the thing. There's never been another case exactly like it. Similar, sure, but nothing with all the same bizarre details. SS, a room mostly untouched. SS, a body reduced to ashes. S, no fire source. S, no accelerants. S as no sound. S, just a pile of ash. And a single foot. We may never know for sure what happened to Mary Reeser. Maybe it was a tragic accident, smoking while sedated, falling asleep, and the Wick Effect doing the rest. Maybe the fire was slow, quiet, and just hot enough to erase almost all of her. Or maybe it was something science still can't explain. Something rare, something that happens once in a blue moon when just the right mix of biology, chemistry, and circumstance line up perfectly. Something like spontaneous human combustion. Whether you believe in spontaneous combustion or not, one thing is certain. Mary didn't expect to die that night. She was sitting in her chair, maybe watching the clock, maybe smoking her last cigarette before bed. And something happened that none of us can truly explain. So the next time you're home alone, late at night, and everything's quiet, remember the story of Mary Reeser. And maybe don't fall asleep with a lit cigarette. just in case.